They say life isn't linear, that the road to figuring out what you want to do or who you want to be isn't easy, and the looming reminder of one's own limited time doesn't help make those hard truths easier to live with. In life, we tend to engage with art for a variety of reasons. For entertainment, to kill time, to engage with a story. A lot of potential explanations for why the work of someone else would interest us. But what happens when a story written by someone else who doesn't even know you exist reflects your life so much it leaves you awestruck? Like, I've related to characters before, like Luna in Hell of a Boss or Peppermint in Hi-Fi Rush, but I'd argue no fictional characters really felt like a reflection on myself, quite like Beat from 2025's indie darling, Unbeatable. For those unaware, Unbeatable is a recently released indie game from developers D-Cell Games. Unbeatable came out December 9th and managed to slide on into the ranks of one of the best of 2025, alongside the likes of Dispatch or Geno Kids. But to me, Unbeatable stands out among not just other games of 2025, but the decade period. I played the entire game in one sitting. I had intended to play it in multiple sittings, but I did the entire 8-hour play session in one go because I couldn't put the game down. Not just because its gameplay is engaging and addictive, but also because I was invested in the story. And I'm gonna do the thing I don't normally do and discuss the story just as much as I will the gameplay. I'm going to discuss the gameplay first though, because there's less to say comparatively, and honestly I just think my overall end statement will flow better if the story is discussed in the second half of the video rather than the first. So, have you ever played Muse Dash? Okay, so imagine that, but replace all the questionable anime girls and Beat Mania reject soundtrack with a Trigger Studios styled art style and Paramore-like music, because that's unbeatable. You press one bumper to hit notes at the top and the opposite bumper to hit the notes at the bottom. These notes are monsters called silence. Creatures that are summoned by heavy emotion, and that's probably a dumbass simplification of their lore that is literally explained in the game's story, but I've never pretended to be a wordsmith. Honestly, the silence come off to me like a long-lost Kingdom Hearts enemy type. However, despite this, the silence as summoning was pinned on the mere existence of music, and thus, in Quaver's world, music has been outlawed by a police state-like organization named Harm. Yes, they weren't very subtle about that, but I am also a writer who is also not very subtle with my own work, so personally, I vibe with this. Enter our protagonist, a young woman named Beat. She wakes up in this world unaware of its lore and with no record of her anywhere within said world. This seems a bit confusing on the first playthrough, but I can assure you when we get to the story stuff, it'll make more sense. Beat meets a 12-year-old girl named Quaver, and one prison escape later, the two form a band with twins Treble and Clef as a way to fight back against the regime installed onto this world by Harm. You know, Rage Against the Machine and whatnot. The game's main focus mechanically is the rhythm aspect. The core gameplay that I described earlier is synced to the music, and this also translates into mini-games during the story mode as well. Now, fun fact about me, I fucking hate it when video games add mini-games that are mandatory for story completion, but it's not for them existing. Usually, when I complain about stuff like Sly Cooper games or No More Heroes Free for doing this, it's because said mini-games don't really adapt the pre-existing core gameplay and are instead just half-assed one-offs that take me out of the experience. I'm not playing No More fucking Heroes Free to play musical chairs. I'm not playing Sly Free for pirate action. I'm not playing Final Fantasy VII to go snowboarding, etc, etc, etc. However, Unbeatable manages to avoid this pitfall by making all the minigames that are mandatory to the story progression use the same core gameplay mechanics. Baseball, fistfights, hell, even chase sequences all use the game's rhythm mechanics. Said rhythm mechanics that are already established as the base for how you play them, which is all I've ever wanted from games that insist on doing multiple gameplay styles for variety, or whatever junk excuse platformer fans use to justify 80% of the genre being full of that fluff. Look, this is entirely subjective, but I much prefer when video games play to their strengths and primarily focus on their core gameplay rather than trying to have variety over the course of a campaign. It's why my favorite games are stuff like Hi-Fi Rush or Dead Rising or Mirror's Edge, because they know what they do best and allow you to play the game you're here to play, and Unbeatable thankfully does this as well, making story mode mostly a pretty consistent experience. And it means the minigames that I don't enjoy aren't enjoyable for reasons other than just existing. It's one minigame. Bartending. Bartending isn't fun. But that's also my only negative critique about this game, so don't worry, I'm not about to turn into Gex up and go into a controller-breaking frenzy because of the Jack 2 turn sections.
Come on!
The game is also such an outlier in the soundtrack department, at least in its base original OST. Most rhythm games tend to lean into more electronica, dance, and no better way to put it, anime music. And while that stuff is good and has its place, I know Unbeatable's soundtrack is more than likely going to resonate with rhythm gamers like me that got into this genre for things like Guitar Hero, as Unbeatable has a Warped Tour-esque soundtrack provided by Peak Divide. Their singer Rachel Lake even voices Beat. I love this soundtrack, and even if I wasn't about to praise this game overall, I'd probably still adore this soundtrack. I loved it so much I actually spent money to buy the game's album off Bandcamp, and it got me back into downloading music onto my phone instead of relying on music streaming like I had been. This game's OST was so good, it altered my own life habits. Now, let's discuss the story of the game more in depth. This is the part where I will no longer hold off on spoilers. Part of the reason I talked about the gameplay first was so that if anyone watching didn't want spoilers, they got to hear my opinion on the game's gameplay before needing to dip. So anyway, on to the story. So I mentioned previously how silencers are summoned due to strong emotion. This wasn't just me explaining the monsters you fight during gameplay. This detail is actually crucial to the story of the game too. So 2/3 of the way through the story, Penny betrays Beat. Penny's name comes from pensato, an imaginary note that is written but not played nor heard. The note's name is derived from the Italian word for thought, so her being a twist villain is actually spelled out to you in a very subtle way, especially considering upon first meeting her, she insisted the group shorten her name. Beat ends up on the losing end of a tussle with Penny due to blindly trusting Penny because Penny was promising Beat production on the band's album, playing into Beat's deep instilled desire to make something meaningful that can live forever long after she dies. Also, yes, I know Penny's actual name is Sirfranzo, but I'm 99% sure I can't pronounce that properly, so I'm calling her Penny so I don't spend a million years re-recording this video just to get that name right every time I say it. Admittedly, this turn in the story was one of the first moments that really hit home for me. I know firsthand what it's like to isolate myself and ignore people who had my best interest in mind while blindly following and giving my support to someone who didn't deserve it. Unknown to me, from this point on, the game would continue to hit story beat after story beat that would reflect my own life. Right, getting ahead of myself. What does this have to do with the silence? Well, Penny explains to Beat that she matches up with Silence at about 99% DNA-wise. What does this mean? Well, hilariously enough, I didn't actually realize what was being said till the credits, but basically, the reason Harm had no records on Beat is because she isn't from the world of Unbeatable. What happened was after receiving the text of her mom's death, she ran out of her apartment and got run over, being sent into a coma and by proxy, was summoned to the world of Unbeatable due to Quaver's intense emotions. Quaver misses her mom, who she never truly got to know before her death, and that emotion led to the coma-induced Beat to be transported to this world from her own in order to help Quaver learn to honor her mother, not by trying to be like her, but by never forgetting her love for her or what her art represented. Think about it. Beat has the same passion for music Eve does, but it's stated in the game that Quaver told Rest, Quaver's current guardian and former bandmate of Eve's, that she looks a lot like Beat.
She once told me she thinks we look alike.
Beat is a combination of Quaver's past and present guardian, and Quaver is a reflection of Beat's ambition, her desire to become a musician and to play her music freely despite the setbacks. You see, Beat was kicked out of her previous band due to her lateness and overall inability to commit. Beat suffers from a lot of personality flaws. Beat is impulsive, she's emotional to a fault, she's ambitious, and has a habit of putting a lot of her own self-worth into the music she makes. These faults don't make Beat a bad person, but it leads to a lot of her mistakes both before and during the story of the game. Those faults are why Beat had her fight with Clef early in the story. It's why she was so willing to blindly trust Penny. It's why she argued with her bedridden mother days before she passed away and blamed her for her getting kicked out of her former band. Beat is someone whose worst enemy is herself, and this is a fact she comes to terms with during the game's third act, via giving the advice she needs to hear to other characters such as Crest or Poco and Apico, a pair of twins I've been affectionately referring to as Thought News. I actually want to highlight the Poco and Apico bit because this moment in particular is one of my favorites in the game.
Why does it hurt at all, though, if you're so above it all? If you didn't care about the thing you did? Just admit you give a shit. What are you embarrassed about?
It's not that, it's...
What?
Like you?
Yes, of course I am. The shit I do is the shit I am. And yeah, maybe it's not healthy just how much self-worth I attach to what I make, but I'm a mature enough goddamn human being to admit I care when someone hates what I've made. and that I love it when they love it.
I remember so vividly how that part left me frozen, lost for words. The shit I do is the shit I am. It was there I realized just how much Beat was like me. I am my work. I am everything I make, and it's why I had that period of time during 2025 where I spiraled into a position of feeling like nobody cared about what I made. I quit my webcomic Gun Kitty for almost a year because it wasn't getting the reception I wanted for it. I kept trying to convince myself that it didn't matter and that I made things solely for me, but that's not true. I want people to feel seen in the things I make. I want people to grow attached to my stories, to my characters, to the things I spend days, months, sometimes years working at bit by bit. I've spent so much of my life short-tempered and attention-hungry, trying desperately to be a part of something, of trying to belong, of seeking the recognition I thought I was owed because of how hard I worked on the things I made. I can deny it all I want, but I'm scared that I'll never make something that can have the impact I want it to. I've lost friends, I've made bad choices, I've jumped into things with no planning, all for my desire to be in the spotlight, and it sucks. I on and off feel like such a horrible person, like I'm a fraud, like a million insulting words I could say right now. I don't work fast enough, or I don't do enough in one day productivity-wise, yada yada yada. And Beat's the same way. To me, Beat may have been summoned to help Quaver get closure on Eve's death and form her own path in life, but I'd argue Quaver does just as much for Beat by the end of the game. Beat needed to be given direction. She needed to be shown that it's okay to be flawed, to have these faults, and be willing to admit you're still worth love, still worth pursuing your dreams even after screwing up, even if it's as royally as Beat does over the course of the game's middle part. From the word go, over the entire course of the game's climax, I kept seeing myself in Beat. A lot of this video was just me wanting to have an outlet to try and put together all of those emotions. Unbeatable is a game I really love. Obviously, I enjoy the gameplay, and I'm really glad there's an arcade mode that lets you experience the story's gameplay without needing to replay the story over and over, because lord, this story mode is one I am not emotionally stable enough to replay as often as I'd want to. But oh boy, I'd want to. Like I said at the beginning of the video, Beat isn't like other characters I've related to. I mean, she is, but I mean that she's special. I see her faults and see my own. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I tend to lash out and overreact in moments of extreme stress. I'm paranoid nobody wants me around. I get hurt when people forget basic facts about me, and I certainly do put a lot of my self-worth onto my artistic creations. I don't just say Beat is just like me for real because she dresses how she does or has my snarky attitude. I also say it because she's a reflection of not just the parts of me I like, but the parts of me I hate. She's a reflection of my own experiences, my desires, my pains. Hell, her fucking family even reflects mine. Her sister is someone Beat openly says she conflicts with because she tried to take care of her, and Beat was mad because she wasn't her mom. Which is exactly something I've said to my own sister, who, by the way, Beat's sister also looks like my sister too, so that adds to it. I see Beat's mom, and all I can see is my own mother. Thankfully, my mom is still alive, but the game's story really did make me sit with the fact that I will one day have to live through her death. And I'm 99% sure I'm going to be just as irrational and unstable as Beat was when it happened to hers. Unbeatable isn't perfect. At least not objectively, but does that matter? Unbeatable appeals to the people it resonates with. It appeals to people who vibe with it mechanically and narratively. People like me. But I know that there will be people who don't click with it, who don't get it, and as pretentious as that could sound, it's true. I know that if Unbeatable was more mainstream, it'd end up with some people misunderstanding it or even basing their critiques on that misguided takeaway from the game. Just look at some of the takes said about a more mainstream game like Hi-Fi Rush. YouTubers like Gennery Perez or Gabriel Lovecraft, for example, presented takes that, in my opinion, show a severe lack of engagement with Hi-Fi Rush's intent.
I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me. Especially as a fan of certain creators who constantly gripe that their vision gets beaten to submission by budget concerns spewed from the mouths of executive fat cats. So the game mocking this aspect of creativity in the industry that historically gets choked and crushed very often by those of higher power feels kind of shitty to me.
For an entirely visual example, Hi-Fi Rush is a very impressive game with a lot of style to it, but it's a really cobbled together style inspired by a bunch of random unrelated things the devs thought were cool. I understand they want a punchy and loud style to match with the game's rhythm gameplay, but while I think the game is perfectly fine at contextualizing the mechanics, and those mechanics are very well done, it also feels like a total poser game aesthetically.
And I mean no direct hate towards these creators. At least, I don't anymore. A hard fact of life I'm still struggling to come to terms with is that art is never going to be understood by or click with 100% of everyone. Even something as universally praised as Hi-Fi Rush is going to have people who don't vibe with it. And yeah, those people's opinions can be misguided or actually wrong, but it's just, well, it happens. But I bring this up because it doesn't take away from Hi-Fi Rush or what it represents, or how it impacted me and others like me. And the same goes for any piece of art. And this goes back to Unbeatable. Unbeatable is without a doubt messy and rough in places, especially at launch. But to a lot of people, myself included, those issues were overshadowed by all the game's best qualities. Unbeatable is the kind of game that can only exist as a product of the unfiltered creativity of a group of passionate people. The gaming industry, in terms of AAA stuff, is kind of in a bad place right now. So much corporatizing of the medium has resulted in a lot of AAA games being overpriced, overproduced, and overhyped, only to never last past a short period. But then you look at the indie scene and it's a different story. Like, sure, indie games aren't perfect, and I think people overestimate the quantity of standout indies in the wild, but come on, it's no contest which of these two sides are better. Unbeatable represents why creativity matters. Why putting in the efforts to make the things you want to make matters. Why our flaws don't mean we aren't capable of being better or pursuing our passions. Unbeatable is messy, flawed, and imperfect. Just like Beat is. Just like all people are. Just like I am. I'd highly recommend playing Unbeatable. Without any doubt, Unbeatable is a game I'd recommend anyone even mildly interested in it should play. Even if you leave it with less positive opinions than me, I still think you'll get something of substance out of it, especially if you're a creative, aspiring or otherwise. Some days it could be easy for me to look back on my life so far and see nothing but my mistakes, see nothing but my failures. But that's not all there was, and that's certainly not all there will be. I have to live with my faults, but that doesn't mean I need to let them consume me or define who I am trying to be now. I am taking steps in the right direction. I'm trying to be more empathetic, more patient, more kind, not just to others, but to myself. It's like Beat says in the game. I'm 7 years different. It's 7 years better. And I refuse to be worse than who I was before. I am Beat. And by extent, that means Beat is me. Beat is Danica. I am Danica. And Danica is unbeatable. I am unbeatable.
Give me a hug.
Of her mom. The caption says, I can't believe it. It's been a decade since you've been
This is how singing should feel.
I love you too, Mom. Obviously.
And I don't know who I am right now.
And I don't know who I am right now,
But I am better than who
but I am better than who I was before. I am 7 years different, and I am 7 years better, and I refuse to be worse than who I was before.
White woman's Instagram.